This is not good. It's like the end of days. Huh. Caught in the time stream. Well, totally different kind of temporal storm. Hey there, I'm Zippy Wonderdust, and this is not going to be a typical episode. As you just saw, I loaded into my game only to be confronted by a temporal storm of an entirely different nature. This was obviously a game bug of some kind. A quick search of the Vintage Story discussion forums revealed that I was not breaking new ground here. This is a long-standing gotcha bug that can apparently be triggered if you are too fast off the mark when saving your game. Specifically, if you save and quit immediately after having slept, the save file can capture a state where the game thinks that the world is in its fast-forward sleeping mode, but you aren't in bed anymore. We'll go into more detail about this in a bit. I think that one of the reasons why this bug has never been fixed is that there's an easy way to deal with it in game. You simply put your character back to bed and everything returns to normal when you wake up. A bit like sleeping off a bad hangover, I guess. Fixing the problem this way bothered me, though, for two reasons. One, as my character had just woken up, I would be forced to wait for most of the admittedly super fast forward speed day before the game would let me sleep again, and then I would have to wait through another sleep cycle because I sure as heck wasn't going to interrupt it early just in case it would screw things up in another way. The upshot of which is I lose a whole in-game day. I'll agree that in most cases this would be a big nothing burger, but this was only the beginning of day 6 of a playthrough with temporal storms enabled. I felt that every day counted, and was none too happy about being cheated out of one. We've got things to get done here, gosh darn it. Reason 2 is that this is obviously caused by incorrect data in the save file. The programmer in me kept thinking, surely this can be fixed by finding and editing that bad data back out of the file. And I'll be honest here, truth be told, there is also a third totally egotistical motivation for doing this, which is if someone tells me you can't do that, it very much makes me want to prove them wrong. In this case, it was the rather nebulous world at large implying that editing my save file was just going to be too hard. So I decided that I would give it a try. Let's leave this world for a little while and spend some time in my other world, a world of code. Okay, so here we are. I thought, well, let's have a look inside the Vintage Story save files. And the one in question here is this guy, who is with Zippy Wonderdust's Adventure Valley Backup 3-bad. I'll tell you why I have 1, 2, and 3 here, but this is the one that's got the bad save data in it. And I happen to know that this is saved in a format called SQLite 3, which is a file format that imitates a structured query language database without actually having to run a database, which means that we can open it up using a SQLite 3 browser program, which I happen to have, DB browser for SQLite. So let's open this guy up and we'll have a look at it. And I've tried to make as many fonts large as possible so that people can see it in the video, but some fonts just can't be made large. So anyways, this opens it up, and what we want to do is well, there's the database structure. We have some tables: chunk, game data, map chunk, map region, player data, and SQLite sequence, and some indexes. And where the rubber seems to hit the road is in here. We got chunk. I'm figuring that now this is a recreation. I've already been through all of this, but I figured that the problem was either going to be in the player data or the game data. So if we have a look, let's go browse data, pull up the player data table, and we have one record, which appears to be the ID for the player pointing to a binary blob. And over here is the contents of our binary blob. Let me see if I can make this window a bit bigger. There we go. There's our binary blob. That's with some text translation over here, so we can see that it's got a whole bunch of variables that we'd expect to have Vintage Story have in here backpack, slots, durability, all that kind of stuff. So that is looks to be a binary bitstream sequence representation of probably a bunch of data structures in the game that just get dumped into here. That one's a possibility. And the other one was game data, which lo and behold is the same thing, a table with one entry and a blob, and this is an absolutely huge blob. Megabytes of binary large object data. And this particular program here, the DB browser, is not really well suited for browsing binary large objects. So in order to do our next step here is I had to export this, which I did. There's a little export button up here that you can use, and I exported both the game data and the player data blob so that we could have a look at it in another program. Which, if we close this guy and we go into our export folder here, I exported a few. The one in question again is game data 3, player data 3 dash bad. If we open this guy up, we can open it up with a hex editor. If we open it up in imhex, boom. And now we're in a format that we can be a little happier about. Now, I knew from my research that this was a problem with the game's perception of sleeping, okay, what state they think the sleep mode is in. So I had a big guess, and I thought, well, why don't we, well, first off, here's our data. Here's the ASCII or UTF-8 interpretation of the data. We can see a whole bunch of stuff which makes a lot of sense here. Saturation loss, update total hours. Like, these are totally different variables and data structures pertaining to how the character works. And this one isn't that big. So what happens if we do a little search for it? So Garrett view, find, and we will, why don't we do search for sleep? And look at that. We have a variable here, or we have an entry here that says is sleeping. If we click on it, it takes us into the file here, and there's our byte stream, there's our entry. At this point, kind of have to understand how this is all put together. What is the structure of this data? We can't change it unless we know what the structure of it is. And looking at it, I thought this is some binary serialization format, but did a little research, and I'll tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like protobuffers. It doesn't look like JSON-B. It doesn't look like Bison. It doesn't look like any of the binary JSON formats. It doesn't look like message pack. Because I looked up the stats and the statistics, the specs for all of those, and none of them describe something that looks like this. On closer examination, you can tell that it is in a format of something along the lines of our first byte is a type header of some kind, our next byte is a length that describes whatever the field is, because if we look at this number here, that hex code 18 corresponds to, if we make our, let me pull this down a bit more, it is in unsigned LEB 128 notation 24. If we actually go 24 characters over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We started on 1, so that's 24. That's that string sequence. And then we have perhaps a value of some kind, and we come along, and our next string sequence here, the hotbar one, is once again, it's prefaced by what appears to be a type, and then a length. So it seems to be in a format of data type, payload, and the payload can be broken off into a length and probably some certain subfields. Some payloads might even be more complicated than that. My best guess, I looked up the C# binary formatter specification, which is a sort of a binary bitstream utility built into C Sharp, and it kind of describes the same thing, but none of the labels match up. None of these hex codes match up with anything that's in the binary formatter document that I was able to find. And binary formatter is now deprecated. Microsoft says that it's insecure, which means I'm guessing that a properly crafted bit stream, when fed back into the interpreter, can either cause it to crash or execute code, an arbitrary code, or something like that. Everybody wants you to stop using binary formatter. But so I kind of had to just sit here and reverse engineer it a bit myself, which I did. I kind of picked apart some of the entries, and if I bring in another thing here, kind of figured out what some of the bytecodes seem to represent. I took the first part of the file and split it up according to it, and it kind of made sense. So I think we got enough to go on here. Now, here's the thing though. Long story short, that is sleeping entry here isn't the problem, because it is sleeping, and after you work it out a little bit, it appears to be a entry with a type code of 1, which is a 32-bit integer. That is the title of it there, and the value of that is 0. So you can think of it as a variable. The variable is sleeping is set to 0 or false, which means that in this portion, in the player data, it thinks we're not sleeping, which begs the question, what does the game think is happening? Well, let's go have a look in the game data and see what it thinks is going on. Let's close this, saving, and let's open the other one. So game data 3, open you, and here we are. And now we have, if you notice the teeny tiny size of this scroll bar, we've got a lot of data. But let's do another search for sleep. And once again, we've got painting, sleeping wolf. That's not going to be what we're looking for. Temporal storm, sleeping is interesting, but we've got another one here, sleeping, right here. And it's down near the bottom of the file, which implies maybe it gets appended as an extra state. And it's right next to other game parameters. Survive and build describes what mode are we in. Hardcore mode would have a different entry there. And then game mode, survival. So survive and build is not so much a game mode. It's I don't know. It's like another type of game mode. And we've got all of these pairs of data pairs here. And we've got sleeping. And right after it, we've got 5 bytes. 1500 A0 A5 44. Which is, okay, we have an entry. This implies that sleeping has a value associated with it. We could guess that maybe it's these 4 bytes here, separated by a key of some kind. And that 32-bit float interpretation of it, 1325, is an awfully round number for a floating point. So that might be it. Maybe, sleeping 1325 is some number that implies that you're sleeping and that's how long you've been sleeping for. I don't know, but it seems like a good thing to look at. So the question is, if this is what's setting it, and it appears that I'm gonna digress here a little bit. Item number 1, it looks like when you save your game, it saves the game data portion first, and then maybe saves the player data, which could explain why this problem happens in the first place. Because you save the game data and the game still thinks you're sleeping, because maybe it hasn't quite caught up. Maybe there are processes running that keep that from being updated. But then by the time it gets to saving your player data has been updated to say you're not sleeping anymore, which is where you get this mismatch. So anyways, that's a good one to look at, but how do we know what to change it to? what value would this be if the game thinks the game is not in sleeping mode? Well, the easiest way to figure this out is to look at a different save file, one where it's working properly and you're not sleeping. And I chose to look at two of them. If we have a look at the next one here, it is, I said, well, what happens if I've got a save from the very beginning, when I just started the game. Fresh in, I literally started the game and then saved it within a few seconds as a good place to start off from. If we open that one, game data bin, and do a quick search through that for sleeping, you will find that there is no sleeping entry at all. So that implies, well, maybe we could just get rid of the whole entry. But let's just double check something. What does it look like later on if we are at a point in the game where we have slept and successfully saved the file and successfully got back in? So let's close that and let's open up. That's my game data 2. So game data 1 is fresh game, hasn't been played for more than a few seconds. Game data 2 is at some point before our crash. Game data 3 is the save point that we have where it's not good. And I actually have game data 3 after sleep, and that is experimental. I loaded the game in, I waited until I could go back to bed, I went back to bed, waited through that. Indeed, it fixed the problem. I then saved the game, so I was curious to see what the game data looked like after that. But let's look at this one first, number 2. And we'll go do a search for sleeping here. And whoa, there it is. So apparently that variable gets stuck in there probably after the first time you've slept. But you'll notice it looks a little bit different. It doesn't have anything after it. This sequence here, which leads into survive and build, is different. That is the beginning of this sequence here, I have determined. So we have a variable called sleeping with no value after it. So one could assume that maybe that means sleeping 0. And in fact, the preamble I figured out for that is this. Apparently it is entry type of 1. It has a length of 10, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is then type A, whatever that is, a type 10, with a title length of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's kind of like a bit of an onion. It's a value inside of a value. Okay, so in that case, that one has no value. And it is bordered by the end of that data structure there, E2. And on the other side here, this beginning of this data structure, EA. So we have that as an option. So what do we do at this point? Well, it looks like I cannot find the format specification for this, but it looks like a raw bit stream. It has, I'll tell you what it doesn't have. It doesn't have any sort of version information. It doesn't have a magic number at the beginning. It doesn't have a data dictionary at the beginning of it. It's just raw data that's been dumped out, and obviously you're supposed to know how to interpret it. What this implies is that this format seems to be just a stream of data. It probably doesn't care too much about what is added or removed, so long as you know where to insert it. I couldn't see anything that looked like a value for how large the whole file was or anything like that, which would maybe throw up an error if we changed something in it. So if we go back down to here, what this implies is that if I either removed the whole byte sequence here, which represents this value, which is from here through to here, that appears to be the beginning of a new section there, and that appears to be the end of an old section there. We should be relatively safe in getting rid of that without screwing up the ability to read what comes later. So let's pop back to the version 3, or save file 3, which is the one with the bad data in it. Let's go back to this guy and do a quick search again to locate it. So that implies that the minimum change I can make to this, which would probably fix the problem, is you'll notice that, well, the value after sleeping has to be removed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bytes there have to go. And then it looks like we've got this byte here. This is the beginning of that whole section, and this byte here appears to indicate the length of the remaining section, which is 15 bytes from here to here. That's 15 bytes. Now I'm trimming 5 bytes off of it, so I have to trim those 5 bytes off, and I have to change this value from 15 down to 10, which is going to go from hex F to hex A. That should work. Let's give it a try. We'll do that in the database browser, because it does give us the ability to change stuff, and that means I don't have to change this and then re-import it. So let's go and do that. Okay, so here we are back in the database browser with the corrupted save file opened. Let's pull up that binary blob data. Now it's going to take a little bit of searching here, just eyeballing it to find the right spot. We know it's near the bottom though, so let's just scroll back up until we get to, here we are, sleeping. There we are. So we're going to want to remove the 5 bytes after sleeping. So that's this guy, 1500A0A544. So let's just remove those 5, and then sleeping, SLEEPING, that's our length of the word sleeping, which is 8, which is correct. That is our type header, which we don't want to change. That's the length of the label plus its value, which is now going to be A. So we want to change that to 0A. And that should be that. Apply. And write changes. And at this point, we should be able to load it up into our game and see what happens. Okay, here we go. We're loading up our hopefully fixed version of the save file. And let's see what we see. And see, so far so good. Rather than having to fight any critters, let's pop ourselves into creative mode. Just makes life a lot easier. It's 8 o'clock in the morning and everything appears to be fine. Yay! And we haven't lost any time. 8:40 a.m. Obviously, I will reload this again to start my actual playthrough, but we're good to go. And there we are. The bug appears to have been fixed with no in-game time sacrificed. Now, how confident am I that I haven't screwed anything else up in the process of trying to fix this? well, 95% confident that this is going to work. The file has experienced no crashes. I've seen no error messages, no other buggy behavior. I re-examined the save file after saving the game again, and it looks good. So it appears that modifying that one little bit in there hasn't messed up anything else. So I'm fairly confident that this has worked. However, if anybody out there knows what format this is actually saved in, or maybe has a reference to a document that describes it, please feel free to contact me, because I'd really like to know. A little other digression is I am amazed at one level that saving the game this way is performant. Okay, it kind of reminds me, I look at it and I see what the devs at Ninja Story really like JSON. So I'm seeing what possibly is a JSON data structure that has been serialized into a bit stream, stuffed into an SQL database table, and then wrapped inside a file and saved to disk. It kind of reminds me of Winston Churchill's old quote describing Russia. It's a riddle inside a mystery wrapped in an enigma. There's so many different layers to this. It probably is. It probably is fast enough and good enough, but it bugs me that it's like a thing wrapped inside a thing wrapped inside a thing. I opened up the SQLite database initially expecting to see, at least for the game data or the player data, a series of tables with records in them like you would find in any other SQL database. And instead I see one blob that's been stuffed in there. Like, I know why they're doing it. They are simply taking the existing data structure in the game, taking a snapshot of it, and stuffing it into a file so they can then grab it and put it back later when you reload the game. But like I said, it bugs me. I would much prefer to be able to see stuff as a series of SQL records, or heck, even a JSON file. So this is just me. Me being a grumpy old programmer, lamenting the fact that we can't have human-readable formats all over the place. Once again, though, thanks for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little deep dive into modifying the save game for Vintage Story. If you like this, please subscribe, enable notifications, all that YouTube-y stuff. You know what to do when it comes to that. And next episode, we'll be back to playing the game as we have for the last 5. Until then, see you soon.